Hey guys, I'm Buster Green, an anime YouTuber who specializes in robots, and hey, Tom Hanks made a robot movie. So this is going to be a quick review of the Tom Hanks movie Finch, which strangely enough seems to be the best movie that Apple Plus has to offer right now, as far as I can tell. I watched this movie back to back with Nightmare Alley this weekend, and I definitely enjoyed it way more than that. By the way, leave a comment if you'd rather have my review of Nightmare Alley, because I'll think about doing that too. So once I review this movie, stick around for my general thoughts on Apple Plus as a channel as a whole, which is probably the bulkier end of this video. Honestly, if you just want to hear about Apple Plus and not this movie, skip ahead to the next chapter, I guess. Finch is a movie with a super old Tom Hanks as the last man on Earth, and his best friend is a robot, and he has a cute dog. Now, if you've seen the old Tom Hanks movie Castaway, this is honestly kind of a ripoff like that, like how Jim Carrey a bunch of movies where he had weird rules about how he could talk. Anyway, I'd say this is actually somehow better than that movie though, because it at least has this sombering sadness and a message. Although what's weird about this movie is the robot he teams up with talks back to him in this sassy Yag Shamash Borat voice, which I can't even do right, but why is the robot talking like Borat? Is it because robot is Borat backwards? I don't know. Anyway, so the premise of the movie is that Tom Hanks is the last man on Earth because at some point a solar flare hit the Earth and completely destroyed the ozone layer, causing an ultra-dramatic climate change situation where the average daily temperature in America went up to about 150 degrees. All the ice caps melted, the East Coast flooded, and direct exposure to the sunlight is now lethal to everybody. Now, despite this, people were still able to go out at night, but obviously with no sun to play around in, shit broke down fast, society collapsed, you couldn't get vegetables anymore, all the animals died, so people drew guns, and a few months later, Tom Hanks is the last man on Earth. Go figure. Anyway, the movie has a pretty cool opening where Tom Hanks is salvaging in a grocery store, and this short opening makes it feel really like this is Fallout 3 the movie to me, which is cool, because I really like Fallout. Then he goes back to his lab where he makes this robot, and he's making it the total style of Mega Man. He's just only you can defeat Dr. Wily. Anyway, he's apparently made the robot because he knows he's dying and he wants someone to take care of his dog. Oh, and by the way, the dog is also the last dog on Earth. But then a massive superstorm comes to hit their lab, so they leave the city and go out on a massive road trip to San Francisco. And along the way, they have a bunch of goofy and heartwarming misadventures because the robot's so silly and Tom Hanks is old and cranky. And there's this one really super surprisingly intense sequence where another car is following them, and Tom Hanks is just being full-on super paranoid about it. For all we know, it could have been a car full of cheerleaders making brownies, but the movie just sells it oh my god, this is death. And it surprisingly really works because they don't show you who's in the car. You never find out more about it, so it's really just Tom Hanks selling his paranoia and fear with his A-rank acting ability. It really makes you afraid of other people the way Tom Hanks acts. Anyway, I want to say around Nevada-ish, Tom Hanks just up and dies, which is pretty nuts because it only seems like this trip should have taken 5 days. After that, the robot takes over, and that's where the movie just starts to get its footing. But then after that, the robot and the dog finally make it to the Golden Gate Bridge, which is all rusted over and creepy in that life after people way. They find traces there of other humans still being alive, or maybe they were in the past. It's very vague. And so the robot resolves himself to find the other humans, and the movie just cuts off there. Feeling a little weird, a little abrupt, and making me really want to see a sequel. So I looked into, is there going to be a sequel? And weird fact about this movie. So as I was researching into it, it turns out that it was made by Universal, but then the pandemic happened, so they just carelessly sold it to Apple Plus to get their money back, because, Apple's all about them robots. But apparently there was actually an entire third act of the movie where the robot did go on a second adventure and actually found some people. But apparently this second adventure wasn't that good cinematically, so they decided to just entirely cut it off. Maybe they're saving it as the opening for the sequel? That's what I hope anyway. It's weird though, because I always see movies that feel like they would have been better if they just cut them off early. And this is one of the only ones I think I've ever seen that actually did that. So props for doing that, I guess. But yeah, that was a weird, really roundabout decision to chop off the third act of the movie. So very, very curious. All right, anyway, yeah, Finch is the best movie on Apple Plus, and it gets a final rating of 7 out of 10. Because it is a sad, somber, thoughtful, post-apocalyptic movie about the last days of humanity. Tom Hanks is ironically perfect in this because it's Tom Hanks and he knows how to act by himself in a movie. And the robot is a weirdly cool protagonist who eventually grows to be enjoyable. Although, why the fuck does the robot talk like Borat? Like, what the fuck is that? They could not think of, like, any more creative a voice than Borat. Especially considering that, like, Borat came out, like, last year, too. So, like, Borat's back in, like, the popular discussion. Oh, and also, cons, this movie reminded me again that climate change will kill us. It will kill us all. It will kill our children. Climate change is coming to kill us. My God, why aren't we doing anything? Anyway, so all in all, the movie is pretty good, but I honestly didn't buy Apple Plus just to watch a weird Tom Hanks in a robot movie. Actually, to be honest with you guys, I didn't buy Apple Plus at all. I'm borrowing from a relative who has a subscription because they bought an iPhone this year. The main reason I got Apple Plus, though, is because I love Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart was like my hero growing up, and he has a new pseudo daily show on Apple Plus. I do not like what Trevor Noah has done with the original Daily Show. He's like completely mangled it to the point where it's completely unrecognizable, and Jon Stewart can just pop up on another channel with literally the original Daily Show, like nothing had ever happened. Anyway, despite that though, the Jon Stewart show is not that good either. Okay, here's the thing. He's releasing these semi-regular, super cool podcasts on YouTube of all places. But the Jon Stewart Problem Show on Apple Plus, so far it's only had 4 episodes and they've been super bleak and super depressing. No jokes whatsoever and way too many dead veterans and dead women. Now, I feel kind of duped with this one because the podcast is so much better than the show and the podcast is free on YouTube. If I could have talked to myself in the future right now, I would have told myself in the past that fuck the show, the podcast is better, you don't need Apple Plus. Because the thing of it is, Apple Plus has existed for like 2 years, and they still have so little content on it that it's a joke. Like, the thing of it is, Apple Plus was created to compete with Prime Video. Apple Plus is Apple's answer to Amazon Prime having Prime Video. But Prime Video is mostly just old crap that people have forgotten. But if you look closely at it, there's a few gems hidden in there, and there's a few old foreign movies that are generally pretty enjoyable. And for the love of God, they have the Evangelion rebuilds right now, which is like my religion. Now, Amazon Prime used to have a cool indie program that was really neat until they shut it down because that was just losing them money. But meanwhile, Apple Plus is trying to be a clone of Prime, and it lets you rent movies like Prime. But if you have a subscription, you can only watch like fucking 7 things because that's all they made. They've like literally made like 7 things in 2 years. And I guess they bought this movie from Universal. Like, the biggest thing that sets Apple Plus apart from all the streaming services that you could go with instead is that Apple Plus has to obey mall law. Okay, you're saying right now, what the hell is mall law? So mall law is the law that dictates that you can show certain things in an American shopping mall, but you can't show violence or porn. I want to say this is because there used to be video stores in the mall, or, you know, there's like Hot Topic and they're all gothed out. Anyway, so typically this mall law only applies to commercials, but because it's a ban on gore and nudity, and because Apple is a vain, money-hungry company who just literally want to show commercials for their Apple Plus products in their Apple stores. I mean, Amazon has stores and they don't do this. Disney has stores and they don't do this. Only Apple is dumb enough to try to sell their streaming service in a mall, and because of that, their streaming service is crippled by mall law. Mall law means that the channel can never have any original content that has hardcore violence or full frontal nudity. So, yeah, that's not very fun. And yeah, so that's another reason why 2 years into Apple Plus, they only have like 7 things, because Apple literally has to go out of their way to produce things for them. Otherwise, like, no one really wants to make a show for Apple Plus. I mean, sure, they'll make it if you give them $1 million, but it's not like that's the first pick. So, yeah, there's only like 7 things that are good, but I will say they are very good. because Apple Plus seems to be doing like a quality over quantity approach to differentiate themselves against Netflix and Amazon, which are their main competitors, but still, they have so few things that I can count them all in my hand. So real fast, here's anything else I thought was good on Apple Plus if you have Apple Plus or you ever think about getting it. The best / funniest show on Apple Plus is Mythic Quest Raven's Banquet. It's kind of a ripoff of The Office or Parks and Rec. It's a show about a video game company, and they make vague video game jokes, and they're making this vague video game that's like either it's the World of Warcraft or it's Skyrim. They honestly used footage from both based on the episode. Despite that though, the show is an interesting mix of like super funny people. Like they have pretty much a really good cast with like the funniest people on television. And fundamentally, it's just a show of video game jokes, and I'll always laugh at video game jokes. Next up, Apple Plus has a weird deal worked out with NASA, so they can have this like speculative NASA alternate history show about the space race, if it had kept going, called For All Mankind. I just watched the first season. It's interesting enough to stick with it, but I've definitely zoned out on a few episodes because the show gets pretty still and boring when there's not like an Apollo like exploding or like Russian sabotage or like murder. Although I do find it interesting that they've sidestepped using lookalikes by overdubbing real-life documentary footage at points, which is a very interesting move cinematically. Oh my god, is that it? Apple Plus has one good movie and 3 good TV shows? Oh my god, that's so much worse than I thought it was in my head until I actually took the time now to count it out. Okay, was there anything else I watched? Okay, I also watched this very, very lame musical called Schmigadoon. It starred Keegan-Michael Key, and it was made by a bunch of SNL people, and it felt like an incredibly horrible 6-hour SNL sketch about how bad, stupid, and racist musicals are. And, I think that's it. Oh yeah, Snoopy's on there, okay. So all the old Snoopies are on there, plus some badly made new Snoopies, including a Snoopy that ties into NASA because of the NASA deal. As much as a lot of people love Snoopy, unless you're under the age of 10, I mean, Snoopy's only so interesting. The only time most people give a crap about Snoopy is Christmas, or Halloween, or Thanksgiving. Those specific 3 holidays only. I'm honestly really surprised that considering how many original comics there are about Snoopy, and Charlie Brown, that no one's ever fully adapted them all. Snoopy on Apple Plus ended up being more of a scandal than a benefit because Apple completely bought out the rights to Snoopy, so now Snoopy doesn't appear on basic television anymore, ironically weakening his modern day relevance and also somehow angering the long built-in Snoopy fan base of your 10-year-old brother and your grandmother. Yeah, good job there. So yeah, I guess that's Apple Plus. It's really not a good channel or a good streaming service. I guess it's okay if you really like Jon Stewart and you want to see a robot movie and you have a relative who buys an iPhone and then you can watch it for free, but yeah, there's literally only 4 things on it, so wow, that's so much worse than I thought it was. Okay, anyway, I'm you, Buster Green, and I watched all 4 things on Apple Plus, which exist in 2022. Apple Plus needs to make new stuff. Yeah, Apple Plus is not a very good channel. Alright, please subscribe. I'll be back later. Thank you. Later.